Labor should be in politics so our husbands can get better wages, better working conditions, and a higher standard of living.
We should all be in politics all the way down the line, and labor is no exception.
Labor in politics? Thank heavens they are. Show me any other group that fights for all the people the way labor does.
Why ask should labor be in politics? Is it its duty?
Labor has to be in politics to protect its own. Heck, we know what the NAM is spending on political action.
Labor is in politics because politics is people.
I'm James McDevitt, the National Director of COPE, the political arm of the AFL-CIO. COPE stands for the Committee on Political Education, COPE. There may still be some good trade union members who don't understand why we have such a committee or how we operate. There may be others who wonder if we do any good. No one can discuss these matters better than the National Chairman of COPE, the President of the AFL-CIO, Mr. George Meany.
We're in politics for the same reason we're in the labor movement, to build a better life for ourselves and for all Americans. No one is really out of politics. We're all affected by political decisions. The only question is, are we going to participate in an active and organized way, or are we just going to be spectators and let others play the game that so vitally affects the lives and welfare of all? No, we in organized labor have too much at stake to be mere spectators in the game of politics. There was a time when life seemed to be simpler. There was a time when some trade unionists thought they could get along just by negotiating good contracts, organizing the unorganized, processing grievances on the job, and doing their part as good neighbors in the community. But it only seemed that way. It wasn't really like that in the good old days either. Half a century ago, Samuel Gompers set forth the political program of the labor movement in his time. He said the objective of the AFL was, quote, to defeat labor's enemies and reward its friends, unquote. That's a pretty good statement of the case, even after 50 years, except we have to take into consideration the changes in the country and in the labor movement itself. Samuel Gompers was talking about a labor movement of less than 3 million members, maybe a fifth of our membership today. Samuel Gompers was talking about a time when trade unions had all they could do to survive.
The bayonets of federal troops smashed the Pullman strike in 1894. National Guardsmen in many states over many decades cleared the way for strikebreakers. To the courts, unions were an evil conspiracy. The robber barons were firmly in command. Yes, the business of America was business and politics, riding high until, well, if you're old enough, you remember, the Depression. "1932 was a people's revolt, a revolution by ballot, and Franklin Roosevelt gave it substance and direction.
There's a new day coming, and it's not far off. Been a long, long time on the way. So come on, children, won't you come with me? Bring you a brand new day."
The New Deal changed the face of the nation. And for the first time, it wrote into law protection of the right of workers to organize and bargain collectively. But big business, the people Roosevelt called economic royalists, hadn't given up. Unions were too strong to be licked on the picket line. But there was always the ballot box. In 1946, only 28 million Americans bothered to vote. About a third of those who could. The rest were spectators. Workers were not yet organized and active in politics. The result was the 80th Congress, the Taft-Hartley Act, and a flood of anti-labor laws in the states. By 1948, the enemies of labor were moving in for the kill. A sure thing, the polls said. Not so sure after all. But it wasn't a total victory. The reactionary tide was stemmed, but not turned back. Even now, there's no let-up in the big business drive to outlaw the union shop. 19 states have done it. And the U.S. Chamber of Commerce wants to add the other 31 to the list. They call it right to work. This law designed to outlaw union security, weaken organized labor, and break the union wherever possible. Then in 1959 came Landrum-Griffin, a law that clamps a vice on every legitimate union. And that's not all. Now employer groups want to go back to 1914 and put unions under the antitrust laws, so that two local unions in different units of the same company can't take joint action in their members' interest. Money is no problem to labor's enemies. A Senate committee reported that in 1956, 12 wealthy families alone gave more than $1 million to back their favorite candidates. The officers of 6 giant corporations put up another $500,000. $1.5 million right there. But elections are not won by money alone. It takes candidates and issues and work and people. And these are the things that labor has, if it uses them.
Our labor movement is far more powerful today than it was in Samuel Gomper's time. But our obligations, our responsibilities are also much greater. Despite new gains by the labor movement, we still have to defend ourselves against those who want to destroy our economic effectiveness. We still have to protect as well as improve the wages and hours and working conditions of our members. More than ever before, we have to fight for job security, for fair and reasonable safeguards against hardships imposed by automation, for a fair and reasonable share of automation's benefits. These are a union's first and fundamental obligations. But we can't stop there. The labor movement today is the trustee of the national interest. We are proud to call ourselves the People's Lobby, by far the strongest organized force in America that is dedicated to the progress of the country as a whole. What do we want in the way of progress? First of all, we want to keep our country strong and free, the rightful leader of the free world. We want every American to enjoy all the blessings of liberty, in school, on the job, in the place he lives, equal opportunity for all. To get equal opportunity, there has to be full opportunity, and that means full employment and an end to unemployment and misery, to substandard wages and a future without hope. It's the same story in education and in housing. We want to wipe out segregation, but we can't stop there. We have to do away with crowded classrooms and poorly paid teachers. We have to remove the financial barriers to higher education. We have to get rid of our slums. And we want greater security, too. We want economic security within the framework of the new technology, automation. We want people to be protected against the hazards of illness and old age, protected as a matter of right under our time-tested Social Security system. We want all these things and a lot more, not just for ourselves, but for all Americans. And we can get them. They won't come easily. They won't come overnight. We have to fight for them. This battle for the general welfare can't be fought only at the bargaining table or on the picket line. It has to be fought with votes on election day. It has to be fought by union members with their time, with their energy, with their convictions, and with their COPE dollars. We heard a few minutes ago about the war chest of labor's enemies. It's bigger than ever. Business and industry are stepping up their political campaigns. They're getting more money and they're lining up more management people as political workers. We have the manpower if we get it moving. We even have the money, not as much, but enough if we all contribute. So when someone asks you to give $1 to COPE or to take a COPE assignment, remember, politics is the key to your future. Only through politics can this land of ours fulfill its unlimited promise. Only through politics can America's future be even prouder than her past. And that's why we're in politics, not just for ourselves, but for our country.
All right, thank you, Ms. Price.
Thank you very much.
Next, please. Have you changed your address since you last registered? You place your right hand on the Bible, please. Do you swear all the information you're about to give me will be the truth to help you God?
I do.
What is your last name? Harley. How do you spell it?
Harley.
This scene is repeated by the hundreds of thousands throughout the country each year. Free men and women exercising their constitutional right to register prior to voting in the coming election.
Apartment.
Where were you born?
Philadelphia, Pennsylvania.
Your birth date is?
7/2/34.
Your occupation?
Secretary.
Color of your eyes? Brown? Brown hair? Where were you living when you last registered?
9941 James.
The Berlin Wall, symbol of tyranny. Not a barricade for defense, but a cage for those behind it. That's what happens when freedom is lost. This is our way. And what makes the difference? In a word, politics. The people behind that wall in Berlin have lost their political voice. We want to make our political voice more effective, as President Meany points out.
The brass tacks of politics begins with registration. Unless people are registered to vote, it doesn't matter what they think. They can't do anything about it. So that's the first step, getting people registered. Let's take a look at it.
Okay, thank you. What about you? Are you registered?
Yes, I am.
For how long?
Oh, about 15 years now.
Thank you very much. Are you a registered
Yes, I am. About 15 years.
Thank you. Are you registered?
No, I'm not. I can't see what difference one vote makes.
Here, thanks to an active COPE program, about 60% actually do register. That's a lot better than average. In the country as a whole, less than half the wage earners, less than half the union members ever get around to it. Look at the figures. About 120 million American citizens could have voted in 1960. Less than 80 million, less than two-thirds, bothered to register. It's true that in 3 states there's still a poll tax, and in some states we have to fight against a deliberate campaign to prevent the registration of Negroes. But mostly, registration is easy enough if people take the trouble. The people who live here, the employers, the executives, do take the trouble. The people who live here, which is most of us, too often just don't get around to it. Here's what this meant in one city. In a group of high-income precincts, there were 18,400 adult citizens. 17,000 of them registered, and almost 16,000 turned out on election day. In a group of precincts in the same city, mostly populated by trade union families, there were 43,400 adult citizens, but only about 11,000 registered, and a mere 8,622 went to the polls. So, 18,000 citizens outvoted 43,000 citizens, almost 2 to 1. The title of this story might be, Why We Lose Elections. What can we do about it? Here is a COPE chairman from one of our eastern cities.
Like everything else in the labor movement, the most important factor in COPE activity is voluntary manpower and womanpower. A few years ago, the gubernatorial candidate supported by labor in this state was elected by a plurality of only 3,000 votes. If it hadn't been for the COPE activity, I am sure he would not have had even this slim margin. On the other hand, in a recent congressional election, the candidate friendly to labor lost by only 450 votes. If we had had more volunteers in this area, I am sure this election could have been won. In spite of the fact that we need thousands of additional volunteers throughout the country, I am grateful for the successful program we have in this area under Madeline's direction.
COPE work is not seasonal. It goes on all year round. It's hard work, but it's interesting and has its compensations on election day. And here's how it works. 1, this is the procedure. After we receive the membership list from the local unions, they are coded. Then each member's name and address is typed on an individual card. 2, The next step is to check the union member's name in the phone book and add his telephone number to his card. 3, his name is then checked in the city directory to find out if the member is married, has any children, or any other relative living with him. 4, now we have to find out what voting district the member lives in. Mary is doing this by checking the member's street address in the district finder. 5, with the voting district entered on his card, we now check the official voting list to see whether the union member and or members of his family are registered. 6, the names and addresses of all non-registered workers and their families is then sent to the local union. The local's COPE committee will then make contact and urge each member and his family to register. 7, all this information is copied on a second and third card. The first set is filed by local union, the second set by voting district without regard to union, and the third filed alphabetically.
This is basic work, essential work, done by COPE's women volunteers. And when it gets down to the deadline, there's no substitute for footwork and phone work.
This is the committee on political education.
Yeah, fine. Well, we can arrange for a car to pick you up tomorrow.
Yes.
Oh, you will
I
be there
see.
tomorrow.
We shall send a man then to have you for a babysitter so that you may be able to go and vote. Tomorrow is the last day to register.
Between 7 and 8.
Someone once said that politics is 90% clerical work. He was right. And clerical work means volunteers to do it. Experience has proved that the greatest source of help is woman power. A women's activities division, the WAD whose work means victory. There's no one right way to do the job. Every part of the country has its own special ways, its own special problems. In some communities, election officials have helped to make registration easier, setting up shop in churches, in supermarkets, in firehouses, even in department stores. It's only reasonable to ease the way for busy workers, weary workers, who find it hard to take part of their precious leisure time to go to some out-of-the-way courthouse to register. It's only reasonable to put registrars right in the places they work, in-plant registration. A few minutes here, and the worker is a qualified voter, too. Yes, National COPE can help you once you begin to help yourselves. There are handbooks, leaflets, posters. But the people come first, the working people. And first, they must have a voice. Only then can they be heard.
Unless people are registered to vote, it doesn't matter what they think. They can't do anything about it.
This is it, the main event, the payoff day for all the work that's gone before. Too late now for registration, too late for debate. This is the moment of truth. What is labor's role? George Meany sets the stage.
On election day, we have only one problem, getting out the vote. We don't tell people how to vote. We just want as many people as possible to go to the polls. Whatever the decision may be, we want it to be a real majority decision, a majority of all the people. That doesn't happen unless we help to make it happen.
Even the experts don't know why Americans are so casual, so offhand about using their right to vote. In 1960, when we could have had a vote of 120 million, only 80 million bothered to register, and less than 70 million actually cast ballots. In the classic phrase, a majority of those present and voting was under 35 million. Less than 30% of those who could have voted, and that was a presidential year. In the off years, a majority may be a mere 20%. 1/5 of the citizens deciding for all. We ought to be ashamed of ourselves. Let's compare the U.S. with some other free countries. Here's Great Britain. 35 million adults, 27 million voters. Sweden, a little country, only 4.8 million grown-ups, but 4 million of them voted. Switzerland, the Rhode Island of Europe, 1 million out of 1.4 million went to the polls. These aren't the world's best turnouts. They're just typical of the record in other nations. We need this kind of vote in our country, too. Now and then in certain areas, we get it.
COPE's operating committee is now in session, and we'll hear a report from your director, Ed Toohey. Ed?
Well, gentlemen, tomorrow is Election Day. It's the day that we've been looking forward to for a long time. I think we ought to prepare ourselves to come early tomorrow and stay late. I think we ought to keep in mind the importance of the one vote. We know by a great deal of history how many victories have been turned into defeat by the lack of one vote. Joe, I wonder if you could give us a rundown rather quickly on your field operations.
A few highlights that should be remembered and followed. This office will be open all day for complaints and emergencies. Your people must be on the polls by 6:30 and check each machine to see that it's registered at 0. We're not interested in our workers standing around the polls. Get those workers that can out early, get the wives during the day, and then at 5 o'clock make sure you go to each member's home and get him to vote before the polls close. You should tour the wards to make sure that our people are on the job. In the evening, don't leave the polls till you get the results and bring them into headquarters.
Thanks, Joe. Charlie, I wonder if you could sort of let us know just what you've been doing insofar as the carpools are concerned.
Ed, I think we're in pretty good shape regarding the carpools. We have them located in all 6 congressional districts, and the ward captains will be responsible for all drivers and their activities. Instructions have been given to block precinct workers and the drivers as to what they're to do. Any problems that might arise should be referred to our headquarters. The phone number is Chestnut Hill 8-3350. I believe that we have the city amply covered, and everyone knows what they're to do tomorrow. I think we're in pretty good shape, Ed.
Thank you, Charlie. Mary, I wonder if we could have a rundown on the Women's Activities Division for tomorrow's election.
Well, batteries of phones are already set up here in the office, and the 3x5 cards are all arranged according to ward and division, and telephone numbers have been placed on the cards. Instructions have been given to our volunteer operators to be brief, courteous, and by all means friendly. As far as the babysitters are concerned, they are directly in the wards. They have been given ample supplies of taffies and balloons for the children, and they have the phone number here at the office if they need any more help.
Thank you, Mary. Jimmy McGee, and you certainly have that very important assignment of corralling the senior citizens for tomorrow. I wonder if you could sort of give us a rundown on what you have accomplished up to the present time.
Senior Citizens Group have had their briefing sessions and received their precinct assignments. Their instruction fact sheets and street lists are in the hands of the district leaders.
I wonder, Jimmy, if you could also cover for us what you have been doing with the sound truck equipment.
The sound trucks, Eddie, have been assigned to each of the 6 congressional districts and will travel throughout the districts during the day, urging the people to get out and vote.
Thanks a lot. George, I wonder if you could sort of give us what you have been doing insofar as your large masses of volunteers that we can use for tomorrow.
We have a large reservoir of volunteers. We have supplied them with a list of registered voters. All arrangements have been made for proper supervision in coordination with Joe Kelly.
Thank you, George. Well, gentlemen, this about closes it. I think that we all ought to make sure we get a good night's sleep and get up tomorrow and well prepared to work long and make sure that we'll turn this great adventure of ours into a victory. I can't stress too strongly the importance tomorrow of that one vote. Let's make sure that we go out and give it all that we possibly can give it, and I'm sure its victory is going to be ours.
These are the plans, good plans. But, as the chairman said, They need to be carried out. Take these men. They work side by side on the job, and side by side for COPE.
How do you do, Mrs. Thacker? According to our list, you haven't voted yet. Is there any reason?
Yes, there is. I had a ride and it didn't show up, and I don't have anybody to stay with the kids.
Well, if we furnish transportation and a babysitter for you, would be ready to go now?
Yes, that'd be fine.
Oh,
Can
fine.
we use your phone, Mrs. Tacker, to make arrangements?
Yes, you can. Well,
In a matter of minutes, a car from the pool has delivered a babysitter. And the mother is on her way. You're never too old to vote. And again, a pool car makes it easier. These lines ought to be longer, because every vote is precious. Even the statistics are simple enough. In our 50 states, there are some 186,000 political units that are generally called precincts. One vote in every one of them, obviously, means 186,000 votes. The difference in the popular vote between the presidential candidates in 1960 was 118,550. And it's the same story when it comes to senators, congressmen, and everyone else. Yes, one vote counts. Every vote counts. Every vote.
What we want is for the voice of the people truly to be heard. And difference can lose in one election all that we have built up in 3 generations. It has happened before, it can happen again. Yet this land of ours, so richly endowed by nature, can and should be all that our forefathers envisioned and more. It's up to us to make the dreams of 2 centuries come true. It's up to us to make the vision of America a reality for all the people by progress through politics.